Hi everyone, welcome. Today we're going to be talking about local AI. I think we've gotten to a point where trying to figure out or learn or be aware of how you can run local models on your machine or how to build a system, an infrastructure that could run your own local models is really, really important. The US government made a directive to suspend access to Fable 5 and Mythos 5. So Anthropic had to suspend access to Fable 5 because apparently it is too dangerous to have in the open. I think it's only limited to United States citizens at this point in time. But the restrictions aren't necessarily the issue. I think it is the fact that, these things can happen and the government could just whip things out at any point in time. And this brings us to the point of intelligence sovereignty. As an individual, I think that we should be striving towards ensuring that we're able to run AI models on our local server. Now, I do have to say that running local models can be fairly expensive, depending on the model, of course. And there are a lot of intricacies, a lot of nuance that goes into running local models. And we just want to dive into that in today's video. So this is an overview of running real models on your machine. You do not need any cloud provider. You don't need any API and you own your data. So one of the other things that is pretty obvious is the fact that every time you interact with these AI models, with these language models, the prompts you made, the conversations you are having are being sent to their server. So Anthropic has your data, OpenAI has your data, Gemini, Google has your data, DeepSeek, Kimi, and so on and so forth. Privacy is also one of the most important things to consider when it comes to setting up the infrastructure to own your own local model. Now, there are two ways to run AI to get access to intelligence. It could be cloud AI or local AI. And cloud AI is just your internet service, the cloud GPUs, your API access, Anthropic, OpenAI, Gemini, and so on and so forth. You get a response and you get your answer. Now, when this happens, your data does leave your device and you get charged per request. And yes, you do need internet access. And then there is the second way to interact with intelligence, which is local AI. In this setup, you just have your device, the model, and your response. Nothing leaves your device. You basically get charged $0. And it works anywhere, on a plane, in a house. And in the event of an apocalyptic scenario, you get access to intelligence without requiring internet because at that point in time, we won't have internet. Now, why exactly does local AI even matter, right? Why should you consider this? Because honestly speaking, it can be really expensive to run a capable language model locally. So why does it matter? Well, number one is privacy, because every time we interact with a cloud-based AI model, we are sending our prompts to the server and they have every single one of your prompts, your interactions, your ideas, everything you are building. These companies can see them, the logs, everything is public to them. But when you are working with your own local language model, everything stays on your machine and no one else has access to the ideas. Secondly, is it works offline, so no internet needed. This is pretty self-explanatory. You do not need internet access to access a local language model. And there are no usage fees. Now, OpenAI and Anthropic do have free tiers, but these are very, very limited. They aren't particularly generous. So if you want to get the best of the best, you need to bump up to the $20 plan or the $100 plan or the $200 max plans. And at that point in time, you're paying that every single month, $200 every single month. It tends to add up. But with your local language model, you really don't pay anything, right? But that comes at a cost, and we'll get to that in a second. And also low latency, no network round trip. So yes, this is sort of true. But then it also depends on your hardware specifications, which sort of ties us back to the usage fees. And we'll get to that. I guess we'll just have to talk about that right now. As convenient as it sounds to own your own local model, it is also pretty expensive, right? To have a model that is anywhere as capable as Opus 4.5, for example. So I'm thinking GLM 5.2 or Minimax M3. These are open source models. You could download these models and run them locally. This could set you back well over $20,000 at this point in time with the hardware that we have, right? Over $20,000 to have that setup. And that is just you. But then, yes, you do get the privacy benefits. It works offline. You don't have to pay $200 a month anymore. Low latency. You own your data and it is fully customizable. It is not censored. You can do whatever you want with it, but you will have to spend quite a bit of money to get things up and running, right? And that is the elephant in the room when it comes to running local AI. But this is a primer. This is an overview. It's to get us to start thinking about the importance of running and owning our local models. Now, it doesn't mean that there aren't cool, interesting, impressive models that can run locally, that could run on the MacBook Pros. They are really impressive models. However, we're talking about state-of-the-art performance, right? And there aren't that many models that have gotten to Codex 5.5 or Opus 4.8. And I don't even think there's any model that is at Fable's level at this point in time, right? So, those are the things to just consider when we are thinking about running local models. Now, we sort of went over this, but what is the difference between cloud versus local AI? No privacy. So your data is sent to servers, cost you get to pay per token, speed, network latency. This isn't really an issue. It hasn't been an issue for me, to be honest. So it's not a huge deal. But the biggest one is offline. If you don't have internet access, if you're in a remote environment with no internet access and you need to do stuff, you need to get internet access. But with local models on your phone, on your laptop, you really don't need any of that. Also top quality. At this point in time, frontier models are on the cloud. You really can't run them locally except you're spending well over like $50,000 to get RAMs and GPUs and all of that stuff. With local AI, we're close, but we're actually multiple steps behind, honestly. Setup is pretty straightforward with cloud AI usage. There's nothing to install. You just log in and you're good to go. With local AI, you need to set up the RAM, the GPU. Now, there are some machines which are plug and play. The Mac Mini, AMD recently released a device as well. Pretty convenient. I think all you have to do is just download the model and you'll be good to go. But all in all, a couple extra steps to get local AI up and running, but not a huge deal if you have the hardware. So how exactly does local AI work? Well, you start by downloading the model file. Could be from Ollama, Hugging Face, or anywhere you get your hands on the model's weights. You load it into your RAM or VRAM, and then Inference Engine runs it and it streams tokens back to you. There are a bunch of desktop applications that, simplify this process. So Ollama, Llama CPP, and I think LM Studio, does that already. So once you have these tools, you can download the model from their servers, or they just make it available for you to download, and you get access to the model's intelligence, so you can just do whatever you need to do instantaneously. Now, earlier, I did say that it is really expensive to run local models because of the VRAM requirements. A lot of these models require well over 200 gigabytes of memory. But there is something called quantization that sort of shrinks the model size, and it reduces it sometimes by 50%, sometimes by 30%, sometimes by 70%. And it could take a model that is about 200 gigs, that requires about 200 gigs in VRAM, and brings it down to, let's say, 50 gigs of VRAM, right? And then you're able to run that on something like the Mac Mini M4 Pro that caps out at 64 gigabyte of memory. Now, quantization is really fun. It is really, really impressive. It compresses the weight so big models fits into normal hardware. So yes, again, a really large model that is about a few 100 billion parameters is able to run on a rather inexpensive piece of hardware, right? So that is one thing to consider. And I think as the technology advances, we will get to a point where we can quantize even larger models to work on even smaller hardware. On the topic of hardware, what hardware do you actually need? More memory does equals bigger and smarter models. So yes, the larger the memory you have, the better your model performs. So right, if you're thinking of intelligence in the world of AI, you're thinking memory, VRAM, intelligence. The more memory you have, the larger model you can fit. So the larger the model, the more intelligent it gets to be. We do have models that could fit into things like the 8 gigs or 16 gigs of RAM. I think Queen Small Series do a really good job. They run decently well on my MacBook Air M3, and it performs pretty well. I could use that, have basic chats and conversations with that, but I, definitely could not build anything significant with that model. Not at all. And we do have models that could run on 24 gigs of VRAM and 64 gigs of unified memory. So like the Mac Mini, Mac Studio, the MacBook Pros, and so on and so forth. So for those models, we're looking at large mixture of expert models, 300 billion parameters. And there are a few others. There's a whole list in here. I built this really cool website, Can I Run This AI? It gives you an overview of what the hardware requirements are for running local models. So running local models can be challenging, but this helps to simplify the process. When you load it up, it figures out how much memory you have, and it tells you the top picks for your computer. And if you want to build like a custom setup, you're trying to figure out what model can you run with like 200 gigs of memory, and you sort of get that response at this point. And you sort of get the top picks for your hardware. So can I run this.ai helps you navigate what it's like to run local models. All right, cool. So we have our hardware sorted out. We spent a few $1,000s, tens of thousands of dollars, maybe even $100,000 to, get our local model stack infrastructure ready. What model can you run? We have a list here, and this is the tip of the iceberg. There is Qwen 3 from Alibaba, Llama 4 from Meta, Gemma 3 from Google, DeepSeek, Mistral, Phi 4 from Microsoft. We also have Kimi, GLM, Minimax M3, and these are really, really impressive models. I've been testing and playing around with the Minimax M3, GLM 5.2, and Kimi K2.7, and I have to tell you, we aren't that far off from Opus 4.8 performance. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna say. And so you could download any of these models. So these are free models. You could just head over to like Hugging Face or head to their website and download the model, run it locally on your server, and you have intelligence. Again, the more memory you have, which really means the more money you've spent, the larger models you can run, which also means the more intelligence you can pack into your hardware. So what are the tools that will get you started? Ollama, pretty straightforward. LM Studio, Llama CPP, and Jan. So you can get this up and running in a couple steps. You just install the tool, pull up the model, just run the command, and you're good to go. So it's really straightforward, right? I think the hardest part is getting the hardware, it's getting the infrastructure, which is really just capital intensive when you think about it. But, yeah, if you can afford it, I think you should go on ahead and get yourself a ridiculously powerful piece of hardware so you own your own intelligence. And we aren't at the mercies of these giant corporations and just like pulling the rug under our feet when we think things are actually going pretty. So yes, that is pretty much it. I hope this was helpful. This is a primer and overview of getting started with running local models on your infrastructure. Feel free to head over to Can I Run This AI to play around and figure out what the requirements are for certain language models, and just have a good time. I will be updating this with latest models and trying to make this a lot better and help serve you a lot more. But in the meantime, thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.